Welcome to Executive Order Watch.
The immigrants have arrived.
I know. I have the package.
Procedures prescribed under Section 3402 to take into one account the deduction allowed under Section 224. 3D. The amendments made by 4 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 5th, 2024. SCC 110,102, no tax on overtime. DA, Part 7 of Subchapter B of Chapter 1, as amended by the preceding provisions of this Act, is amended by redesignating Section 225 as Section 226, and by inserting after Section 224 the following new section. SEC 225 Qualified Overtime Compensation. 13. There shall be allowed as a deduction an amount equal to the qualified overtime compensation received during the taxable year. For purposes of this section, the term qualified overtime compensation means overtime compensation paid to an individual required under Section 7 of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 that is in excess of the regular rate at which such individual is employed. 737. E. Such term shall not include any qualified tip. Any amount received by an individual during a taxable year if such individual is a highly compensated employee of any employer for the calendar year in which the taxable year begins, or receives earned income in excess of the dollar amount in effect under Section 414 for such calendar year. I. In general. No deduction shall be allowed under this section unless the taxpayer includes on the return of tax for the taxable year such individual's Social Security number. If the individual is married, the Social Security number of such individual's spouse. Married individuals. Rules similar to the rules of Section 32 shall apply to this section. The Secretary shall issue such regulations or other guidance as may be necessary or appropriate to carry out the purposes of this section. 738. No deduction shall be allowed one under this section for any taxable year, beginning after December 31, 2028. 3. DA Note 4 Section 63, as amended by the preceding provisions of 5 this Act, is amended by striking, and at the end of para 6 graph, by striking the period at the end of paragraph 7, and inserting and by adding at the end the 8 following new paragraph, 9. The deduction provided in Section 225. Section 6051, as amended by the 12 preceding provision of this Act, is amended by striking 13 at the end of paragraph, by striking the period 14 at the end of paragraph, and inserting, and 15 by inserting after paragraph the following new para 16 graph. 17. The total amount of qualified overtime 18 compensation. CSN 20T rated as mathematical or C20E. Section 6213, as amended by the pre-22 seating provisions of this Act, is amended by striking 23 at the end of subparagraph, by striking the 24 period at the end of subparagraph and inserting 25. 739. And by inserting after subparagraph the full one lowing new subparagraph 2. An omission of a correct Social Security RIDI number required under Section 225. CA. The table of Section 6 for Part 7 of Subchapter B of Chapter 1, as amended 7 by the preceding provisions of this Act, is amended by Re-8 designating the item relating to Section 225 as an Item 9 relating to Section 226, and by inserting after the item Re-10 relating to Section 224 the following new item. 11, Sec. 225. Qualified overtime compensation. W. The Secretary of the Treasury 12 shall modify the tables and 13 procedures prescribed under Section 3402 to take into 14 account the deduction allowed under Section 225. 16. ED. The amendments made by 17 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 18, 31, 2024. 19 SC 110 and 3. Enhanced deduction for seniors. 20. IG Section 63 is amended by add 21ing at the end the following new paragraph. 22. Bonus additional amount for SEN 23. 24. 740. I in general. In the case of any taxable year beginning after December 31st, 2024, and before January 1st, 2029, the dollar amount in effect under paragraph shall be increased by $4,000. Limitation based on modified adjusted gross income. In the case of any taxpayer for any taxable year, the $4,000 amount in subparagraph shall be reduced by 4% of so much of the taxpayer's modified adjusted gross income as exceeds $75,000. Modified adjusted gross income. For purposes of this paragraph, the term modified adjusted gross income means the adjusted gross income of the taxpayer for the taxable year increased by any amount excluded from gross income under Section 911, 931, or 933. Social Security number 741. Includes on the return of tax for the taxable year such individual Social Security number, and if the individual is married, the Social Security number of such individual spouse. Married individuals. Rules similar to the rules of Section 32 shall apply to this section. Coordination with inflation add. Subsection shall not apply to any dollar amount contained in this paragraph. Allowance to seniors who elect to itemize. In the case of a taxpayer who elects to itemize deductions for any taxable year beginning after December 31st, 2024, and before January 1st, 2029, there shall be allowed as a deduction the aggregate increase which would be determined under subparagraph, determined after the application of subparagraphs. And with respect to such taxpayer for such taxable year if such taxpayer did. 742. Not so elect to itemize deductions for such tax one able year. CSN 3T rated as M mathematical or C4E. Section 6213. As amended by the pre-5 seating provisions of this Act. Is amended by striking 6, and at the end of subparagraph by striking the 7 period at the end of subparagraph and inserting 8 and by inserting after subparagraph the full 9 new subparagraph 10. An omission of a correct social secu 11 RIDI number required under Section 6312. ED. The amendments made by 15 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 16, 31, 2024. 7C0. No tax on car loan interest. 18. IG. Section 163 is amended by Re-19, designating paragraph as paragraph, and by insert 20ing after paragraph the following new paragraph 21. Special rules for taxable years 22, 2025, 2028 relating to qualified paid 23 Sanger vehicle loan interest. 24. 743. In the case of taxable 1 years beginning after December 31st, 2024, and 2 before January 1st, 2029. For purposes of this 3 subsection, the term personal interest shall not include qualified passenger vehicle loan interest. Qualified passenger vehicle 6 loan interest defined. 7. In general, for purposes of this paragraph, the term qualified passenger vehicle loan interest means any interest which is paid or accrued during the taxable year on indebtedness incurred by the taxpayer after December 31st, 2024 for the purchase of, and that is secured by a first lien on, an applicable passenger vehicle for personal use. E. Such term shall not include any amount paid or incurred on any of the following: a loan to finance fleet sales, a personal cash loan secured by a vehicle previously purchased by the taxpayer. 744. A loan incurred for the purchase of a commercial vehicle that is not used for personal purposes. Any lease financing. A loan to finance the purchase of a vehicle with a salvage title. A loan to finance the purchase of a vehicle intended to be used for scrap or parts. Dollar limit. The amount of interest taken into account by a taxpayer under subparagraph for any taxable year shall not exceed $10,000. Limitation based on modified adjusted gross income. I. In general, the amount which is otherwise allowable as a deduction under subsection as qualified passenger vehicle loan interest shall be reduced by $200 for each $1,000 by which the 745 modified adjusted gross income of the taxpayer for the taxable year exceeds $100,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Applicable passenger vehicle. 15. The term applicable passenger vehicle means 16 any vehicle. 17. Which is manufactured pre-18 merely for use on public streets, roads, and 19 highways. 20. Which has at least 2 wheels. And 21. Which is a car, minivan, 22 sport utility vehicle, pickup truck, or 23 torsicle. 24. Modified adjusted. For purposes of this clause, the term modified adjusted gross income means the adjusted gross income of the taxpayer for the taxable year, determined after application of sections 86, 135, 137, 219, 221, and 469, and without regard to this paragraph and sections 911, 931, and 933. 746. Which is an all-terrain vehicle 1 or 2 any trailer, camper, or vehicle 3, which 4 is designed to provide temporary living quarters for recreational, 6 camping or seasonal use, and 7 is a motor vehicle or is D8 signed to be towed by or affixed to 9 a motor vehicle. 10 such terms shall not include any vehicle, the 11 final assembly of which did not occur within the 12 United States. 13. Other definitions in Special 14. For purposes of this paragraph. 15. A terrain vehicle. The 16 term all-terrain vehicle means any motor 17ized vehicle which has 3 or 4 wheels, a seat 18 designed to be straddled by the operator, 19 and handlebars for steering control. 20. Anal assembly. For per 21 poses of subparagraph, the term final 22 assembly means the process by which a 23 manufacturer produces a vehicle at, or 24 through the use of a plant, factory, or 25. 747. Other place from which the vehicle is delivered to a dealer or importer with all component parts necessary for the mechanical operation of the vehicle included with the vehicle, whether or not the component parts are permanently installed in or on the vehicle. Grade. Indebtedness described in subparagraph shall include indebtedness that results from refinancing any indebtedness described in such subparagraph, and that is secured by a first lien on the applicable passenger vehicle with respect to which the refinanced indebtedness was incurred, but only to the extent the amount of such resulting indebtedness does not exceed the amount of such refinanced indebtedness. Are related parties. Indebtedness described in subparagraph shall not include any indebtedness owed to a person who is related, or 707, to the taxpayer. 748. DAWNTI Section 62 is amended by inserting after paragraph the following new paragraph. Q. Qualified passenger vehicle loan. So much of the deduction allowed by Section 163 as is attributable to the exception under Section 163. 6050. Returns relating to applicable passenger vehicle loan interest received in trade or business from individuals. IG. Any person who is engaged in a trade or business and who in the course of such trade or business receives from any individual interest aggregating $600 or more for any calendar year on a specified passenger vehicle loan shall make the return described in subsection with respect to each individual from whom such interest was received at such time as the Secretary may provide. FMRA return is described in this subsection if such return. Subpart B of Part 3 of Subchapter A of Chapter 61 is amended by adding at the end the following new section. 749 is in such form as the Secretary may pre-1 and 2 contains 3. The name and address of the Indy 4 individual from whom the interest described in Sub 5 section was received. 6. The amount of such interest received. 7. For the calendar year. 8. The amount of outstanding principal. 9. On the specified passenger vehicle loan as of the 10 beginning of such calendar year. 11, 12, 13. The year, make, and model of the AP4 applicable passenger vehicle which secures such 15 loan and 17. Such other information as the Sec. 18 Retary may prescribe. 19. SBI 20R Spec 2IE. Every person required to make a return under 22 subsection shall furnish to each individual whose name 23 is required to be set forth in such return a written state 24 met showing 25. The date of the origination of such loan. 750. The name, address, and phone number of 1. The information contact of the person required to 2. Make such return, and 3. The information described in subpara 4 graphs. And of subsection 5 with respect to such individual with re-7 spec to such individual as the Secretary may pro-8 vide for purposes of this subsection. The written statement required under the preceding sentence shall be furnished on or before January 31st of the 11 year following the calendar year for which the return 12 under subsection was required to be made. 13. For purpose of this section 14. Terms used in this section 15 which are also used in paragraph of section 16 163 shall have the same meaning as was when used 17 in such paragraph. Specified passenger vehicle loan. The term specified passenger via vehicle loans 20 the indebtedness described in section 163.21 with respect to any applicable passenger vehicle. 22. The Secretary shall issue such 23 regulations or other guidance as may be necessary or 824 appropriate to carry out the purposes of this section in CLUD 25. Regulations or other guidance to prevent the duplicate reporting of information under this section. Section 6724 is amended in paragraph by striking or at the end of clause, by striking and at the end of clause and inserting or, and by adding at the end the following new clause. Section 6050A and in paragraph by striking or at the end of subparagraph, by striking the period at the end of subparagraph and inserting or, and by inserting after subparagraph the following new subparagraph. Section 6050A. 752. Section 56 is amended by striking 1 section 163 and inserting section 2 163. 3. Section 85 is amended by striking sub 4 section. Section 86 is amended by inserting 6 163 after 137. 7. Section 135 is amended by insert aiding 163 after 137. Section 137 is amended by insert tending 163 after 85. 11. Section 219 is amended by and 12 inserting 163 after 137. Section 221 is amended by in 14 inserting 163 after 85. Section 469 is amended by in 16 inserting 163 after sections 17. The table of sections for subpart B of part 18E of subchapter A of chapter 61 is amended by 19, adding at the end the following new item 20. Sec 6050AA. Returns relating to applicable passenger vehicle loan interest received in trade or business from individuals. ED. The amendments made by 21 this section shall apply to indebtedness incurred after December 31, 2024. 23. SEC 110,105. Enhancement of employer-provided child care credit. Increase of amount of QCTI. Section 45F is amended by striking 25% and inserting 40%. IMCA, sub 8 section of Section 45F is amended to read as follows. 9. I. The credit allowable under subsection for any taxable year shall not exceed $500,000. Inflation adjustment. In the case of any taxable year beginning after 2026, the Plaque 500, 000, and $600,000 amounts in paragraph shall be increased by an amount equal to such dollar amount multiplied by the cost of living adjustment determined under Section 1 for the calendar year in which the taxable year begins, determined by substituting calendar year 2025 for calendar year 2016 in subparagraph thereof. 754. ESB, Section 45F is one amended by adding at the end the following new paragraph 3. Eligible small business. The term for eligible small business means a business that meets 5 the gross receipts test of Section 448, deter 6 7, by substituting 5 taxable year for 3 to 8 taxable year in paragraph thereof, and 9. By substituting 5 year for 3 year 10 each place such term appears in paragraph 11. CA load for TI 13. Section 45F is amended by in 14 inserting, or under a contract with an intermediate entity 15 that contracts with one or more qualified child care facility 16 ties to provide such child care services, before the period 17 at the end. TGA Bank. Section 45F is amended 20 by adding at the end the following new subparagraph 21. Treatment of jointly owned or 22 operated child care facility. A facility 23 shall not fail to be treated as a qualified child 24 care facility of the taxpayer merely because 25. 755. Such facility is jointly owned or operated by the one taxpayer and other persons. G. Section 45F is 3 amended by adding at the end the following new sub 4 Section 5. RG, the Secretary 6 shall issue such regulations or other guidance as may be 7 necessary to carry out the purposes of this section, include aiding guidance to carry out the purposes of paragraphs 9 and of subsection ED. The amendments made by 11 this section shall apply to amounts paid or incurred after December 12th, 31, 2025. Clean SC 11006. Extension and enhancement of paid FAM 14 ILI and medical leave credit. 15. Section 45S is amended 16. In subsection 17. By striking paragraph and insert 18ing the following 19. For purposes of Section 38(20) in the case of an eligible employer, the paid family 21 and medical leave credit is an amount equal to EI 22 thereof the following. 23. The applicable percentage of the 24 amount of wages paid to qualifying employees 25. 756. With respect to any period in which such employees are on family and medical leave. If such employer has an insurance policy with regards to the provision of paid family and medical leave, which is in force during the taxable year, the applicable percentage of the total amount of premiums paid or incurred by such employer during such taxable year with respect to such insurance policy, by adding at the end the following. Aid of payment determined without regard to whether leave is taken. For purposes of determining the applicable percentage with respect to paragraph, the rate of payment under the insurance policy shall be determined without regard to whether any qualifying employees were on family and medical leave during the taxable year. In subsection, by striking credit allowed and inserting wages taken into account. In subsection, by striking paragraphs and inserting the following. 757. I, except as provided in one subparagraph, all persons which are treated 2 as a single employer under subsections and 3 of section 414 shall be treated as a single 4 employer. I, subparagraph, shall not apply to any person who establishes to the satisfaction of the Secretary that such person has a substantial and legitimate business reason for failing to provide a written policy described in paragraph. Substantial and legitimate business reason. For purposes of clause, the term substantial and legitimate business reason shall not include the operation of a separate line of business, the rate of wages or category of jobs for employees, or the application of state or local laws relating to family and medical leave, but may include the grouping of employees of a common law employer. 758. Treatment of benefits mandated or paid for by state or local governments. For purposes of this section, any leave which is paid by a state or local government or required by state or local law, except as provided in subparagraph, shall be taken into account in determining the amount of paid family and medical leave provided by the employer, shall not be taken into account in determining the amount of the paid family and medical leave credit under subsection. In subsection, in paragraph, by inserting or at the election of the employer for not less than 6 months after 1 year or more. In paragraph, by inserting as determined on an annualized basis after compensation. By striking the period at the end and inserting and by adding at the end the following. Is customarily employed for not less than 20 hours per week. 759. By striking subsection. AB section 280C is amended. By striking 45S and inserting 45S. By inserting after the first sentence the following. No deduction shall be allowed for that portion of the premiums paid or incurred for the taxable year which is equal to that portion of the paid family and medical leave credit which is determined for the taxable year under section 45S. SBN Resource Partners. Each district office of the Small Business Administration and each resource partner of the Small Business Administration, including small business development centers described in Section 21 of the Small Business Act, women's business centers described in Section 29 of such act, each chapter of the Service Corps of Retired Executives described in Section 8 of such act, and veteran business outreach centers described in Section 32 of such act, shall conduct outreach to relevant parties regarding the paid family and medical leave. 760. Credit under Section 45S of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, including through targeted communications, education, training, and technical assistance, and the development of a written paid family leave policy, as described in paragraphs and of Section 45S of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. Internal Revenue Service. The Secretary of the Treasury shall perform targeted outreach to employers and other relevant entities regarding the availability and requirements of the paid family and medical leave credit under Section 45S of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, including providing relevant information as part of Internal Revenue Service communications that are regularly issued to entities that provide payroll services, tax professionals, and small businesses. ED, the amendments made by this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 31st, 2025. SEC 110,107. Enhancement of adoption credit. IG Section 23 is amended by adding at the end the following new paragraph. 761. Portion of credit refundable. So much of the credit allowed under paragraph as does not exceed $5,000 shall be treated as a credit allowed under subpart C and not as a credit allowed under this subpart. Adjustments for Section 23 is amended to read as follows. Inflation. In general, in the case of a taxable year beginning after December 31st, 2002, each of the dollar amounts in paragraphs and of subsection and paragraphs and of subsection shall be increased by an amount equal to such dollar amount multiplied by the cost of living adjustment determined under Section 1 for the calendar year in which the taxable year begins, determined by substituting calendar year 2001 for calendar year 2016 in subparagraph thereof. If any amount is increased under paragraph is not a multiple of $10, such amount shall be rounded to the nearest multiple of $10. 762. Special rule for refundable pour one. In the case of the dollar amount in sub 2 section, paragraph shall be applied 3. By substituting 2025 for 2002 and for the matter preceding subparagraph and 5. By substituting calendar year 2024 feet 6 inches for calendar year 2001 in subparagraph 7 thereof. Section 23 is amended 10 by striking credit allowable under subsection and in 11 inserting portion of the credit allowable under subsection 12. Which is allowed under this subpart. 13. D. The amendments made by 14 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 15, 31, 2024. 6 mates. Recognizing Indian tribal government 17 for purposes of determining whether 18 a child has special needs for purposes 19 of the adoption credit. 20. IG Section 23 is amended 21. In subparagraph, by inserting 22 due Dian tribal government after a state and 23. In subparagraph, by inserting or in 24 Dian tribal government after such state. 25. 763. The amendments made by 1 this section shall apply taxable years beginning after December 2nd, 31, 2024. 3 SEC 101 and scholarship granting organizations. AC contributions of 5 individuals to SGO 6. Subpart A of Part 4 of Sub 8 Chapter A of Chapter 1 is amended by inserting after 9 Section 25E the following new Section 10 SEC. 25F qualified elementary and secondary EDU 11 Cation scholarships. A C in the case of an N13 individual. There shall be allowed as a credit against the tax 14 imposed by this chapter for the taxable year an amount 15 equal to the aggregate amount of qualified contribution 16 made by the taxpayer during the taxable year. In general. The credit allowed under 19 subsection to any taxpayer for any taxable year shall not exceed an amount equal to the greater of 21. 10% of the adjusted gross in 22 come of the taxpayer for the taxable year, or 23. $5,000 24. 764. Allocation of volume cap. The credit allowed under subsection to any taxpayer for any taxable year shall not exceed the amount of the volume cap allocated by the Secretary to such taxpayer under subsection with respect to qualified contributions made by the taxpayer during the taxable year. Reduction based on state credit. The amount allowed as a credit under section for a taxable year shall be reduced by the amount allowed as a credit on any state tax return of the taxpayer for qualified contributions made by the taxpayer during the taxable year. D. For purposes of this section. Eligible student. The term eligible student means an individual who is a member of a household with an income which is not greater than 300% of the area median gross income, and is eligible to enroll in a public elementary or secondary school. Qualified contribution. The term qualified contribution means a charitable contribution to a scholarship. 765. Granting organization in the form of cash or marketable securities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Tuition. Curriculum and curricular materials. Books or other instructional 12 riles. 13. Online educational materials. 14. Tuition for tutoring or educational 15 classes outside of the home, including at a 216 touring facility, but only if the tutor or instruct 17 tour is not related to the student, and 18. Is licensed as a teacher in any 19 state, 20 as taught at an eligible EDU, 21 national institution, or 22 is a subject matter expert in the 23 relevant subject. 24. Qualified elementary or secondary education expense. The term qualified elementary or secondary education expense means the following expenses in connection with enrollment or attendance at, or for students enrolled at or attending an elementary or secondary public, private, or religious school. 766. Fees for a nationally standardized norm referenced achievement test, an advanced placement examination, or any examinations related college or university admission. Fees for dual enrollment in an institution of higher education. Educational therapies for students with disabilities provided by a licensed or accredited practitioner or provider, including occupational, behavioral, physical, and speech-language therapies. Such terms shall include expenses for the purposes described in subparagraphs through in connection with a homeschool. No amount paid to an elementary or secondary school shall be considered a qualified elementary or secondary education expense for the purposes of this section, unless such school demonstrates that it maintains a policy whereby its admission standards do not take into account whether the student seeking enrollment has a current individualized education plan, nor takes into account that the student requires equitable services for a learning disability, and if a student does have such an 767. Visualized education plan. The school abides by the plan's terms and provides services outlined therein. Scholarship granting organizer. The term scholarship granting organization means any organization is described in Section 501 and exempt from tax under Section 501, and pursuant to state law, was able to receive contributions that are eligible for a state tax credit if such is not a private foundation. Substantially all of the activities of which are providing scholarships for qualified elementary or secondary education expenses of eligible students, which prevents the co-mingling of qualified contributions with other amounts by maintaining one or more separate accounts exclusively for qualified contributions, and which either meets the requirements of subsection 768. Contributions are used by the organization to 1. Provide scholarships to individual element, 2. Tertiary and secondary students, including 3. Scholarships for attending private schools. 4. Requirements for SG 50. An organization meets the 7 requirements of this subsection if 8. Such organization provides scholarships to 2 or more students, provided that not all such students the same school. Such organization does not provide scholarships for any expenses other than qualified elementary or secondary education expenses. After application of clause, any such students who have a sibling who was awarded a scholarship from such organization. 769. Such organization does not earmark 1 or set aside contributions for scholarships on behalf of any particular student. 3. Such organization takes appropriate steps to verify the annual household income and family size of eligible students to whom it awards scholarships, and limits them to a member of a household for which the income does not exceed the amount established under subsection. Such organization obtains from an independent certified public accountant annual financial and compliance audits. 770. Meant to take appropriate steps to verify annual household income. income reporting statements for tax purposes or wage and income transcripts from the Internal Revenue Service. Notarized income verification letter from employers, unemployment or workers' compensation statements. Budget letters regarding public assistance payments and supplemental nutrition assistance program payments, including a list of household members. Independent certified public AC. For purposes of paragraph, the term independent certified public accountant means, with respect to an organization, a certified public accountant who is not a person described in section 465 with respect to this organization or any employee of such organization. 771. I in general. A scholarship granting organization may not award a scholarship to any disqualified person. 3. Disqualified person. For per 4 poses of this paragraph, a disqualified person 5 shall be determined pursuant to rules similar to 6 the rules of section 4946. DDB. Any qualified 8 contribution for which a credit is allowed under this Sec 9 shall not be taken into account as a charitable contribution for purposes of section 170. General. If the credit allowable under subsection for taxable year exceeds the limitation imposed by section 26 for such taxable year reduced by the sum of the credits allowable under this subpart other than this section, section 23 and section 25D, such excess shall be carried to the succeeding taxable year and added to the credit allowable under subsection for such taxable year. No credit may be carried forward under this subsection to any taxable year following the 5th taxable year after the taxable year in which the credit arose. For purposes of the 772 seating sentence, credits shall be treated as used on a first burst-out basis. BC. The volume cap applicable under this section shall be $5 billion for each of calendar years 2026 through 2029. And 0 for calendar years thereafter. Such amount shall be allocated by the Secretary as provided in paragraph to taxpayers with respect to qualified contributions made by such taxpayers, except that 10% of such amount shall be divided evenly among the states, and shall be available with respect to individuals residing in such states. FCOM. For purposes of applying the volume cap under this section, such volume cap for any calendar year shall be allocated by the Secretary on a first-come, first-served basis, as determined based on the time at which the taxpayer made the qualified contribution with respect to which the allocation is made. The Secretary shall not make any allocation of volume cap for any calendar year after December 31 of such calendar year. For purposes of this section, the Secretary shall develop a system. 773. To track the amount of qualified contributions made during the calendar year for which a credit may be claimed under this section, with such information to be updated in real time. Annual increases. In the case of the calendar year after a high-use calendar year, the dollar amount otherwise in effect under paragraph for such calendar year shall be equal to 105% of the dollar amount in effect for such high-use calendar year. Use a calendar year for purposes of this subsection. The term high-use calendar year means any calendar year for which 90% or more of the volume cap in effect for such calendar year under paragraph is allocated to taxpayers. Prevention of decreases in the volume cap in effect under paragraph for any calendar year shall not be less than the volume cap in effect under such paragraph for the preceding calendar year. Publication of annual volume. The Secretary shall make publicly available the dollar amount of the volume cap in 774. Effect under paragraph for each calendar 1 year. S. For purposes of this subsection 3, the term state includes the District of Columbia. Informing amendments. 5. Section 25 is amended by 6 striking in 25D and inserting 25D and 725F. The table of sections for subpart A of 9 part 4 of subchapter A of chapter 1 is amend 10 ed by inserting after the item relating to section 1125E the following new item 12. 25F, qualified elementary and secondary education scholarships. EGS 13 for Q Elementary S14 ES 15. Part 3 of Subchapter B of 16, Chapter 1 is amended by inserting before Section 14017 the following new section, 18 SEC. 139J scholarships for qualified elementary 19 or secondary education expenses of 20 eligible students. 21. IG in the case of an individual. 22 gross income shall not include any amounts provided to 23 any dependent of such individual pursuant to a Scholar 24 ship for qualified elementary or secondary education X25. 775 pences of an eligible student which is provided by a School 1 R-ship granting organization. D. In this section, the terms qualified elementary or secondary education expense, eligible for student, and scholarship granting organization have the five same meaning given such terms under Section 25F. T. Subsection shall not apply 7 to amounts received after December 31st, 2029. C. On forming amendment. The table of 9 sections for Part 3 of Subchapter B of Chapter 110 is amended by inserting before the item to 11 Section 140 the following new item, 12. Sec. 139J. Scholarships for qualified elementary or secondary education expenses of eligible students. SU 13. MD 14 and General. Chapter 42 is amended by 15 adding at the end the following new subchapter, 16 Subchapter I. Scholarship granting 17 organizations 18. Sec. 4969 Failure to distribute receipts. 4969 Failure to distribute receipts. G. In the case of any scholarship 2020 granting organization which 21 has been determined by the Secretary to have failed to 22 satisfy the requirement under subsection for any tax 23. 776. Able year. Any contribution made to such organization during the first taxable year beginning after the date of such to determination shall not be treated as a qualified contribution for purposes of Sec. Fortune 25F. R. The requirement described in 6 this subsection is that the amount of receipts of the Skull 7 R-ship granting organization for the taxable year which 8 are distributed before the distribution deadline with re 9 spec to such receipts shall not be less than the required 10 distribution amount with respect to such taxable year. 11. D. For purposes of Section 12. Required distribution amount. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Reduced by the sum of such re-19 seats that are retained for reasonable add 20 administrative expenses for the taxable year 21 or are carried to the succeeding taxable 22 year under subparagraph and 23. I. The required distribution amount with respect to a taxable year is the amount equal to 100% of the total receipts of the scholarship granting organization for such taxable year. 777. Safe harbor for reasonable administrative expenses. For purposes of subparagraph, if the percentage of total receipts of a scholarship granting organization for a taxable year, which are used for admittive purposes, is equal to or less than 10%, such expenses shall be deemed to be reasonable for purposes of such subparagraph. C. With respect to the amount of the total receipts of a scholarship granting organization with respect to any taxable year, an amount not greater than 15% of such amount may, at the election of such organization, be carried to the succeeding taxable year. D. The term distribution includes amounts which are formally committed but not distributed. A formal commitment described in the preceding sentence may include contributions set aside for eligible students for more than 1 year. Distribution deadline. The distribution deadline with respect to receipts for a taxable. 778. Year is the first day of the third taxable year following the taxable year in which such receipts are received by the scholarship granting organization. Clerical amendment. The table of subchapters for Chapter 42 is amended by adding at the end the following new item. scholarship granting organizations. IN general, except as otherwise provided in this subsection. The amendments made by this section shall apply to taxable years ending after December 31st, 2025. Exemption from gross income. The amendments made by subsection shall apply to amounts received after December 31st, 2025, in taxable years ending after such date. Organizational and PA. Prohibition of control over scholarship organizations. T. A scholarship granting organization shall not, by virtue of participation under any provision of this section, or any amendment made by this section, be regarded as acting on behalf of any governmental entity. 779. NO governmental control. Nothing in this section, or any amendment made by this section, shall be construed to permit, allow, encourage, or authorize any federal, state, or local government entity, or officer or employee thereof to mandate, direct, or control any aspect of any scholarship granting organization. To the extent permissible by law, this section and any amendment made by this section shall be construed to allow scholarship granting organizations maximum freedom to provide for the needs of the participants without governmental control. Prohibition of control over NO governmental control. Nothing in this section, or any amendment made by this section, shall be construed to permit, allow, encourage, or authorize any federal, state, or local government entity, or officer or employee thereof to mandate, direct, or control any aspect of any private. 780. Or religious elementary or secondary education institution. NO exclusion of private or religious schools. No federal, state, or local government entity, or officer or employee thereof, shall impose or permit the imposition of any conditions or requirements that would exclude or operate to exclude educational expenses at private or religious, elementary and secondary education institutions from being considered qualified elementary or secondary education expenses. NO exclusion of qualified expenses due to institutions' religious character or affiliation. No federal, state, or local government entity, or officer or employee thereof, shall exclude, discriminate against, or otherwise disadvantage any elementary or secondary education institution with respect to qualified elementary or secondary education expenses at that institution, based in whole or in part on the institution's religious character or affiliation, including religiously. 781. Parental rights to use scholar. No federal, state, or local government entity, or officer or employee thereof, shall disfavor or discourage the use of scholarships granted by participating scholarship granting organizations for qualified elementary or secondary education expenses at private or nonprofit elementary and secondary education institutions, including faith-based schools. Parental right to intervene in any action filed in any state or federal court which challenges the constitutionality of any provision of this section. Any parent of an eligible student who has received a scholarship from a scholarship granting organization shall have the right to intervene in support of the constitutionality of such provision or amendment. To avoid duplication of efforts and reduce the burdens placed on the parties to the action, the court in any such action may require interveners taking similar. 782. Positions to file joint papers or to be represented by a single attorney at oral argument, provided that the court does not require such interveners to join any brief filed on behalf of any state which is defendant in such action. For purposes of this subsection, the terms eligible student, scholarship granting organization, and qualified elementary or secondary education expense shall have the same meanings given such terms under Section 25F of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. SEC 110,110. Additional elementary, secondary, and homeschool expenses treated as qualified higher education expenses for purposes of 529 accounts. IG Sec 529 is amended to read as follows. Treatment of elementary and sec. Any reference in this section to the term qualified higher education expense shall include a reference to the following expenses in connection with enrollment or attendance at, or for students enrolled at or attending an elementary or secondary public, private, or religious school. 783. Curriculum and curricular materials. Books or other instructional mate 3 riles. Online educational materials. 5. Tuition for tutoring or educational 6 classes outside of the home, including at a 2-7 touring facility, but only if the tutor instruct 8 tour is not related to the student. 9. Is licensed as a teacher in any 10 state, 11 as taught at an eligible EDU 12 cational institution, or 13 is a subject matter expert in the 14 relevant subject. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Fees for a nationally standardized norm-referenced achievement test, an advanced placement examination, or any examinations related to college or university admission. Fees for dual enrollment in an institution of higher education. Educational therapies for students with disabilities provided by a licensed or accredited practitioner or provider, including 784. Occupational, behavioral, physical, and speech Land 1 guides therapies. Such terms shall include expenses for the purposes 3 described in subparagraphs through in connection with a homeschool. ED. The amendment made by 8 this section shall apply to distributions made after the 9 date of the enactment of this Act. 10 SEC 1011. Certain post-secondary credentialing 11 expenses treated as qualified higher 12 education expenses for purposes of 13. 14. In G, Section 529 is amended by 15, adding at the end the following new subparagraph 16. Certain post-secondary 17 credentialing expenses. The term Quali 18-fied higher education expenses includes Quali 19-fied post-secondary credentialing expenses. QPC 22E, Section 529 is amended by redesignating 23 section as subsection, and by inserting after sub 24 section the following new subsection 25. 785. Tuition fees. Books, supplies, and equipment required for the enrollment or attendance of a designated beneficiary in a recognized post-secondary credential program, or any other expense incurred in connection with enrollment in or attendance at a recognized post-secondary credential program, if such expense would, if incurred in connection with enrollment or attendance at an eligible educational institution, be covered under subsection. Fees for testing if such testing is required to obtain or maintain a recognized post-secondary credential, and fees for continuing education if such education is required to maintain a recognized post-secondary credential. Recognized post-secondary credential program. The term recognized post-secondary credential program means any program to obtain a recognized post-secondary credential if 786. Such program is included on a state list prepared under Section 122 of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Such program is listed in the Weems Public Directory maintained by the Department of Veterans Affairs. An examination is required to obtain or maintain such credential, and such organization recognizes such program as providing training or education which prepares individuals to take such examination, or such program is identified by the Secretary after consultation with the Secretary of Labor as being a reputable program for obtaining a recognized post-secondary credential for purposes of this subsection. Recognized post-secondary credential. The term recognized post-secondary credential means 787. Any post-secondary employment credential that is industry recognized, including 2. Any post-secondary employment 3 credential issued by a program that is C4 credited by the Institute for Credentialing 5 Excellence, the National Commission on 6 Certifying Agencies, or the American National Standards Institute 8. Any post-secondary employment credential that is included in the Credentialing Opportunities online directory of credentialing programs maintained by the Department of Defense or by any branch of the Armed Services, and any post-secondary employment credential identified for purposes of this clause by the Secretary, after consultation with the Secretary of Labor, as being industry recognized. Any certificate of completion of an apprenticeship that is registered and certified with the Secretary of Labor under the National Apprenticeship Act. 788. Any occupational or professional license issued or recognized by a state or the two federal government. And 5. Any recognized post-secondary Cretan 6 Shield as defined in Section 3 of the Workforce in 7 Innovation and Opportunity Act. ED. The amendments made by 10 this section shall apply to distributions made after the 11 date of the enactment of this Act. SC 11012. Reinstatement of partial deduction 13 for charitable contributions of Indy 14 individuals who do not elect to itemize. 15. IG Section 170 is amended at 16 by striking $300, $600, and inserting $17, $150, $300, and 18. By striking in 2021 and inserting after December 19, 31, 2024, and before January 1st, 2029. 20. ED. The amendments made by 21 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 22nd, 31, 2024. 789. SCC 110,113. Exclusion for certain employer pay 1 months of student loans under EDU 2 National Assistance Programs made 3 permanent and adjusted for inflation. Section 127 is amended 5 by striking in the case of payments made before January 6, 2026. IA Section 127 is 8 amended 9 by redesignating subsection as sub-10 section and 11. By inserting after subsection the full 12 lowing new subsection, 13. I in the case of any taxable 15-year beginning after 2026, both of the $5,250 16 amounts in subsection shall be increased by 17 an amount equal to 18. Such dollar amount multiplied by 19. The cost of living adjustment deter 20 mined under Section 1 for the calendar 21 year in which the taxable year begins. Deter 22 mined by substituting calendar year 2025 for 23 calendar year 2016 and subparagraph 24 thereof. 25. 790. If any increase under para 1 graph is not a multiple of $50, such increase 2 shall be rounded to the nearest multiple of $50. The amendment made by 4 this section shall apply to payments made after December 5th, 31, 2025. 6. Extension of rules for treatment of 7 disaster-related 8 casualty losses. For purposes of applying Section 304 of the Tax 10-Payer Certainty and Disaster Tax Relief Act of 2020. Section 301 of such Act 12 shall be applied by substituting the date of the enactment 13 of this section for the date of the enactment of this Act, 14 each place it appears. 15 SSC 1015 accounts. IG, subchapter F, of Chapter 1 is 17 amended by adding at the end the following new part. 18 Part 9 MAGA accounts 19 SEC. 530A MAGA accounts. 2021, 22, 23, 24. GR a MAGA account shall be exempt from taxation under this subtitle. Notwithstanding the preceding sentence, such account shall be subject to the taxes imposed by Section 511, relating to imposition. 791. Of tax on unrelated business income of charitable organizations. MAGA A for purposes of this section. I in general. The term money account for growth and advancement, or MAGA account, means a trust created or organized in the United States for the exclusive benefit of an individual, and which is designated in such manner as the set. Retary shall prescribe at the time of the establishment of the trust as a MAGA account, but only if the written governing instrument creating the trust meets the following requirements. The individual establishing the account shall provide to the trustee the Social Security number of such individual and of the account beneficiary. Except in the case of a qualified rollover contribution described in subsection, no contribution will be accepted before January 1st, 2026, unless it is in cash, unless the account beneficiary has not attained 792. If such contribution would result in aggregate contributions for the taxable year exceeding the contribution limit specified in subsection, no distribution will be allowed before the date on which the account beneficiary attains 18, or, in the case of such an account, the account beneficiary of which has not attained age 25. If the aggregate distributions from such account exceeds the amount that is to the cash equivalent value of the account on the date on which the account beneficiary attains age 18, the account beneficiary has not attained age 8 on the date of the establishment of the account. The trustee is a bank or another person who demonstrates to the satisfaction of the secretary that the manner in which that person will administer the trust will be consistent with the requirements of this section, or who has so dem. 793. Onstrated with respect to any individual retire one ment plan. 2. The interest of an individual in the three balance of his account is non-forfeitable. The assets of the trust shall not be 5 commingled with other property, except in a 6 common trust fund or common investment 7 fund. 8. No part of the trust funds will be 9 vested in any asset other than eligible invest 10 mints. 11. Eligible investments. The term eligible investments means stock of a regulated invest 13 Met Company 14, which 15. Tracks a well-established index of 16 United States equities 19. Does not use leverage 20. Minimizes fees and expenses in 21. Meets such other criteria as the Sec 22 retary determines appropriate for purposes of 23 this section. 24. 794. Account beneficiary. The term account beneficiary means the individual on whose behalf the MAGA account was established. CH. The contribution limit for any taxable year is $5,000. A qualified rollover contribution. Any contribution from the federal government or any state, local, or tribal government, or in general. In the case of any taxable year beginning in a calendar year after 2026, the $5,000 amount under paragraph shall be increased by an amount equal to such dollar amount multiplied by the cost of living adjustment determined under Section 1 for the CAL. See contributions from tax-exempt sources and rollover contributions. The amount contributed to a MAGA account for purposes of paragraph shall be determined without regard to any contribution made through the program established under subsection. See living adjustment. 795. End our year, determined by substituting calendar year 2025 for calendar year 2016 in subparagraph thereof. If any increase under subparagraph is not a multiple of $100, such amount shall be rounded to the next lower multiple of $100. Amounts allocable to investment. A distribution from a MAGA account of an amount allocable to the investment in the contract shall not be includable in the gross income of the distributee. Amounts allocable to income on the contract used for qualified expenses. A distribution from a MAGA account of an amount allocable to income on the contract and which is used exclusively to pay for qualified expenses shall be includable in net capital gain of the distributee under Section 1. Amounts includable in gross income. Any distribution from a MAGA account which is not described in paragraph or shall be includable in the gross income of the distributee. 796. Qualified expenses. For purposes of this subsection, the term qualified expenses means any of the following expenses paid or incurred for the benefit of the account beneficiary. Qualified higher education expenses determined without regard to Section 529. Qualified post-secondary credentialing expenses. Under regulations provided by the Secretary, amounts paid or incurred with respect to any small businesses for which the beneficiary has obtained any small business loan, small farm loan, or similar loan. Any amount used for the purchase of the principal residence of the account beneficiary, if such account beneficiary is a first-time home buyer, with respect to such purchase. Paragraphs, and shall not apply to any distribution which is a qualified rollover contribution. Additional tax on certain distribute. In the case of a distributee who has not at 797 attained age 30, the tax imposed by this chapter on 1, the account beneficiary for any taxable year in which 2, there's a distribution from a MAGA account of such 3 beneficiary, which is includable in gross income under 4 paragraph, shall be increased by 10% of 5, the amount which is so includable. QRC for 7 purposes of this section. The term qualified rollover contribution means an amount which is paid in a direct trust, 9E to trustee transfer from a MAGA account maintained 10 for the benefit of the account beneficiary to a MAGA SC11 account maintained for such beneficiary. Well, TA13. Rules similar to the rules of section 223.14 shall apply for purposes of this section. 15. Determinations of AD 60C 17C. In the case of an 18 qualified rollover contribution which is described in sub-19 section, any determination required under the sec-20 of the amount of the investment of the contract, or 21 of aggregate distributions from the MAGA account, shall 22 be determined with respect to the aggregate of such 23 amounts for all MAGA accounts of the same account, Ben 24 Fishiary. 25. 798. CA, for purposes of this one section, a custodial account shall be treated as a trust 2 under this section if 3. The custodial account would, except for the fact that it is not a trust, constitute a trust which meets the requirements of subsection, and the assets of such account are held by a bank or another person who demonstrates, to the satisfaction of the secretary, that the manner in which he will administer the account will be consistent with the requirements of this section. For purposes of this title, in the case of a custodial a 13 count treated as a trust by reason of the preceding sen 14/10, the person holding the assets of such account shall 15 be treated as the trustee thereof. 60. A. Upon the date on which the account beneficiary attains 31, a MAGA account shall cease to be a MAGA account, and the amount in such account shall be treated as distributed for purposes of subsection. Multiple accounts of 1 Benny. 799. I, in the case of any duplicate MAGA account of any account beneficiary other than a MAGA account which is established by the deposit through a qualified rollover contribution of the entire amount of another MAGA account of the account beneficiary, such duplicate MAGA account shall cease to be a MAGA account, and the amount in such account shall be treated as distributed for purposes of subsection. And there is imposed an excise tax on the account beneficiary in an amount equal to so much of cash value of the account as is allocable to income on the contract. W. Withholding requirement. In the case of an account terminated under subparagraph, the trustee shall deduct and withhold upon the amount to be distributed the amount in excess described in subparagraph. The secretary, upon determining that a duplicate account exists, shall provide a notice to the account beneficiary of such duplicate account, and to each trustee of any MAGA account of the account beneficiary of such duplicate account, which identifies each MAGA account of such beneficiary and the trustee of each such account. Duplicate account. For purposes of this paragraph, the term duplicate account means, in the case of an account beneficiary for the benefit of whom an account was established by the Secretary under Section 6434, any other MAGA account of such account beneficiary. In the case of any other account 16 beneficiary, any MAGA account established 17 after the first MAGA account established 18 for the benefit of such account beneficiary. 19. Investment in the C. For purposes 20 of this section, Rules similar to the rules apply to a Quali 21 FIDE tuition program. Under 22 Section 72 shall apply for purposes of determining 23 the investment in the contract except that such amount 24 801 shall be determined without regard to any contribution one which is described in subsection 2R. The trustee of a MAGA account 3 shall make such reports regarding such account to the 4 secretary and to the beneficiary of the account with re 5 spec to contributions. Distributions, the amount of invest 6 meant in the contract, and such other matters as the Sec 7 retary may require. The reports required by this sub-8 section shall be filed at such time and in such manner 9, and furnished to such individuals at such time, and in such 10 manner as may be required. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. C. Attribution PUC. The Secretary shall establish a program through which contributions may be made to the MAGA accounts of a large group of account beneficiaries if the contribution is made by any person described in any paragraph of Section 501 and exempt from taxation under Section 501. Such accounts are selected on the basis of the location of the residence of the account beneficiaries, the school district in which such beneficiaries attend school, or another basis the Secretary determines appropriate. And 802. All individuals who are account beneficiaries of such an account who meet the selected criteria receive an equal portion of the contribution. DTSRNCG, Section 1 is amended by adding at the end the following new paragraph. Distributions from MAGA account taxed as net capital gain. For purposes of this subsection, the term net capital gain means the net capital gain increased by the amount includable in net capital gain under this paragraph by reason of Section 530A. Section 4973 is amended by striking or at the end of paragraph, by inserting or at the end of paragraph, and by inserting after paragraph the following new paragraph. A MAGA account, excess contribution. Section 4973 is amended by adding at the end the following new subsection. 803. EC contributions to a MAGA A1. For purposes of this section, in the case of 2 MAGA accounts, the 3-term excess contributions means the sum of 4. The amount by which the amount contributed for the calendar year to such account exceeds the contribution limit under Section 530A. The amount determined under this subsection for the preceding calendar year, reduced by the excess of the maximum amount allowable as a contribution under Section 530A for the calendar year over the amount contributed to the account for the calendar year. DR information to FCC. Section 6103 is amended by adding at the end the following new paragraph. Disclosure of return information to enable certain contributions to MAGA AC. Upon written request signed by the head of the Bureau or Office of the Department of the Treasury requesting the inspection or disclosure, the Secretary may disclose the following return information with respect to a MAGA account to officers and employees of such Bureau or Office to the extent that such disclosure is necessary to carry out Section 530A. Information necessary to identify the account holders in a particular class of beneficiaries identified by a donor as the intended recipients. The name, address, and social security number of a beneficiary. The account custodian and the address of such custodian. The account number. The routing number. 805. Routing of funds and may not be redisclosed by the one secretary. 3. Section 6693 is amended by striking 4, and at the end of subparagraph, by striking the 5 period at the end of subparagraph and inserting 6 in, and by adding at the end the following new subpara 7 graph. 8. Section 530A. CA. The table of parts 11 for subchapter F of chapter 1 is amended by adding at 12 the end the following new item 13, PX. ED. The amendments made by 14 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 15, 31, 2024. 60 to 6 Mega Accounts Contribution Pilot Pro 1718. IG Subchapter B of Chapter 65 is 19 amended by adding at the end the following new section 20 SEC 6434. Mega Accounts Contribution Pilot Pro 2122. IG, in the case of any taxpayer with 23 respect to whom an eligible individual is a qualifying child. 24. There shall be allowed a one-time credit of $1,000 with 25. 806. Respect to each such eligible individual who is a qualifying one child of such taxpayer, which shall be payable by the Sec. 22 retary only to the mega account, with respect to which 3 such eligible individual is the account beneficiary. 8. I, in the case of any eligible individual that the Secretary determines is not the account beneficiary of any MAGA account as of the qualifying date of such eligible individual, the Secretary shall establish an account for the benefit of such eligible individual. Q. Qualifying date. For purposes of paragraph, the term qualifying date means, with respect to an eligible individual, the first date on which a return of tax is filed by an individual with respect to whom such eligible individual is a qualifying child with respect to the taxable year to which such return relates. In the case of any eligible individual for the benefit of whom the Secretary establishes an account under paragraph, the Secretary shall notify any individual with respect to whom such eligible individual is a qualifying child for the taxable year described in para 807. Graph of the establishment of such account, 1 and 2, shall provide an opportunity to such 3 individual to elect to decline the application of for this subsection to such qualifying child. 5. Determination of default trust 6. For purposes of selecting a trustee for an AC7 count established under paragraph, the Sec. 8 retary shall tend to account 9. The history of reliability and Regu 10 latery compliance of such trustee 11. The customer service experience of 12 such trustee 13. The costs imposed by such trustee on 14 the account or account beneficiary and 15. To the extent practicable, the pref 16 errances of any individual described in para 17 graph with respect to such eligible Indi 18 individual. EI, for purposes of sub-20 section, the term eligible individual means an Indi 21 individual 22, who is born after December 31st, 2024, and 23 before January 1st, 2029 and 24, who is a United States citizen at birth. 25. 808. No credit shall be allowed under subsection to a taxpayer unless such taxpayer includes on the return of tax for the taxable year such individual's social security number. If such individual is married, the social security number of such individual's spouse. D. For purposes of this section. Q. The term qualifying child has the meaning given such term in section 152. The social security number of the eligible individual with respect to whom such credit is allowed. Social security number defined. For purposes of paragraph, the term social security number shall have the meaning given such term in section 24. MAGA, account B, the terms MAGA account and account beneficiary have the meaning given such terms in section 530A. 809. PNCF 1C, Part 1 of Chapter A of Chapter 68 of 2 Subtitle F is amended by adding at the end the following 3 new Section 4 SEC. 6659, Improper Claim for MAGA Account Con 5 Tribution Pilot Program Credit. IG, in the case of any taxpayer that 7 makes an excessive claim for a credit under Section 86434-9. If such excess is a result of negligence or 10 disregard of the rules or regulations, there shall be 11 imposed a penalty of $500 or 12. If such excess is a result of fraud, there 13 shall be imposed a penalty of $1,000. 14. D. The terms negligence and disregard have the same meaning as when such terms are 16 used in Section 6662. CS 19 Section 6213, as amended by the preceding Provi 20 Cheyennes of this Act. by striking at the 21 end of subparagraph by striking the period at the 22 end of subparagraph and inserting, and by 23 inserting after subparagraph the following new sub 24 paragraph 25. 810. An omission of a correct social secu 1 RIDI number required under section 6434(2). The table of sections for subchapter B of 6 chapter 65 is amended by adding at the end the full 7 lowing new item 8 sec 6434. MAGA accounts contribution pilot program. The table of sections for part 1 of sub 9 chapter A of chapter 68 of subtitle F is amended by 10 inserting after the item relating to section 66, 58 the 11 following new item 12 sec 6659, improper claim for MAGA account contribution pilot program credit. ED. The amendments made by 13 this section shall apply to taxable years begin after December 14, 31, 2024. 15 Part 3, Investing in Health of American 16 Families and Workers 17 SC. 110201. Treatment of Health Reimbursement AR-18 arrangements integrated with Indy 19 Visual Market Coverage. IG Section 9815 is amended 21. 811. By striking E notwithstanding subsection inserting the following. S insured group health plans, notwithstanding subsection. By adding at the end the following new paragraph. I in general, for purposes of this subchapter, a custom health option, an individual care expense arrangement, shall be treated as meeting the requirements of Section 9802 and Sections 20, 705, 2711, 2713, and 2715 of Title X VXU of the Public Health Service Act. Custom health option and individual care expense arrangements D. For purposes of this section, the term custom health option and individual care expense arrangement means a health reimbursement arrangement, which is an employer-provided group health plan funded solely by employer contributions to provide payments or reimbursements for medical care subject. 812. To a maximum fixed dollar amount for a period, under which such payments or reimbursements may only be made for medical care provided during periods during which the individual is covered under individual health insurance coverage, or under Part A and B of Title XV of the Social Security Act or Part C of such title, which meets the non-discrimination requirements of subparagraph, which meets the substantiation requirements of subparagraph, and which meets the notice requirements of subparagraph. Non-discrimination. In general, an arrangement meets the requirements of this subparagraph if an employer offering such arrangement to an employee within a specified class of employee. 813. Offers such arrangement to all employees within such specified class on the same terms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Does not offer any other group health plan to any employees within such specified class. In the case of an employer who offers a group health plan provided through health insurance coverage in the small group market to all employees within such specified class, subclause shall not apply to such group health plan. Specified class of. For purposes of this subparagraph, any of the following may be designated as a specified class of employee. Full-time employees, part-time employees, salaried employees, non-salaried employees. 814. Employees whose primary site of employment is in the same rating area. Employees who are included in a unit of employees covered under a collective bargaining agreement to which the employer is subject. Employees who have not met a group health plan or health insurance issuer offering group health insurance coverage, waiting period requirement that satisfies Section 2708 of the Public Health Service Act. Seasonal employees. Employees who are non-resident aliens and who receive no earned income from the employer which constitutes income from sources within the United States. 815. Such other classes of employees as the secretary may designate. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. An employer may designate two or more of the classes described in the preceding subclauses as the specified class of employees to which the arrangement is offered for purposes of applying this subparagraph. Special rule for new. An employer may designate prospectively so much of a specified class of employees as are hired after a date set by the employer. Such subclass of employees shall be treated as the specified class for purposes of applying clause. Rules for determining type of employee. For purposes for clause, any determination of full-time, part-time, or seasonal employment status shall be made under rules similar to the rules of Section 105 or 4980H, whichever the employer elects for the plan year. 816. Pyramided variation. For purposes of clause, an arrangement shall not fail to be treated as provided on the same terms within a specified class, merely because the maximum dollar amount of payments and reimbursements, which may be made under the terms of the arrangement for the year with respect to each employee within such class, increases as additional dependents of the employee are covered under the arrangement, and increases with respect to a participant as the age of the participant increases, but not in excess of an amount equal to 300% of the lowest maximum dollar amount with respect to such a participant determined without regard to age. Substantiation requirements. An arrangement meets the requirements of this subparagraph if the arrangement has reasonable procedures to substantiate. 817. That the participant and any dependents are, or will be, enrolled in coverage described in subparagraph as of the beginning of the plan year of the arrangement, or as of the beginning of coverage under the arrangement in the case of an employee who first becomes eligible to participate in the arrangement after the date notice is given with respect to the plan under subparagraph thereof, and any requests made for payment or reimbursement of medical care under the arrangement, and that the participant and any dependents remain so enrolled. In general, as provided in clause, an arrangement meets the requirements of this subparagraph if, under the arrangement, each employee eligible to participate is not later than 60 days before the beginning of the plan year given written notice of the employee's rights and obligations under the arrangement, which 818 is sufficiently accurate and one comprehensive to apprise the employee two of such rights and obligations. And 3 is written in a manner calculated to be understood by the aver 5-age employee eligible to participate. 6. Notice requirements. Such 7 notice shall include such information as the 8 secretary may by regulation prescribe. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, whose employer is first is 19 established fewer than 120 days before 20, the beginning of the first plan year of 21, the arrangement. 22. The requirements of subparagraph 23 shall be treated as met if the notice re 24 quieter clause is provided, not 25. Otis deadline for SIR. In the case of an employee who first becomes eligible to participate in the arrangement after the date notice is given with respect to the plan under clause, or 819. Later than the date the arrangement may take effect with respect to such employee. Inclusion of choice APW 2. In general, section 6051, as amended by the preceding provisions of this act, is amended by striking and at the end of paragraph, by striking the period at the end of paragraph and inserting, and by inserting after paragraph the following new paragraph. The total amount of permitted benefits for enrolled individuals under a custom health option and individual care expense arrangement with respect to such employee. To the extent not inconsistent with the amendments made by this section, no inference shall be made from such amendments with respect to the rules prescribed in the Federal Register on June 20th, 2019 relating to health. 820. Reimbursement arrangements and other AC1 count-based group health plans, and 2. Any reference to custom health option 3 and individual expense arrangements shall for purposes of such rules be treated as includ. 5ing a reference to individual coverage health 366 reimbursement arrangements. Other conforming of rules. The Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Health and 9 Human Services, and the Secretary of Labor shall modify such rules as may be necessary to conform 11 to the amendments made by this section. ED. The amendments made by 13 this section shall apply to plan years beginning after 14 December 31, 25. Failed ACC Zone NO2. Participants in choice arrangement, Eli 16 Gibble for purchase of exchange insert 17 ants under cafeteria plan. 18. IG. Section 105 is amended by 19, adding at the end the following new subparagraph 20. Exception for participants in 21 choice. Subparagraph 22 shall not apply in the case of an employee Par 23 participating in a custom health option and Indy 24 visual care expense arrangement within the 25. 821. Meaning of Section 9815, offered by the one employee's employer. ED. The amendment made by 3 this section shall apply to taxable years beginning after December 4th, 31, 2025. SE 03. Employer credit for choice arrange 67. In G subpart D of part 4 of sub 8 chapter A of chapter 1 is amended by adding at the end 9 the following new section 10 SEC 45 BB employer credit for choice arrange 1112. G for purposes of section 38. In 13 the case of an eligible employer, the choice arrange 14 meant credit determined under this section for any taxable 15 year is an amount with respect to each employee enrolled 16 during the credit period in a choice arrangement main 17, attained by the employer equal to 18. $100 multiplied by the number of months 19 for which the employee is so enrolled during the first 20 year in the credit period and 21. 1/2 of the dollar amount in effect 22 under paragraph for the taxable year, multiplied 23 by the number of months for which the employee is 24. 822. So enrolled during the second year of the credit P1 riot.
Welcome to Executive Order Watch.
The immigrants have arrived.
I know. I have the package.